So, have you ever really thought about what goes on inside an ESL classroom? An English as a second language class? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the whole world of ESL education. And trust me, it's way more than just grammar drills. We're going to dive into the professional strategies, the big picture systems, and all the stuff that's in place to support this really important and growing part of our communities.
Wow, they're the silent majority. That quote from a teacher in Colorado just hits you, right? It really gets to the heart of why we're even talking about this. See, in a lot of schools, English language learners aren't just some small group on the side. They are a massive part of the student body. So their success is literally everyone's success. Figuring out how to support them isn't just a side project. It's one of the biggest challenges in education today, for sure.
All right, so let's get into the challenge. Before we can even talk about solutions, we've got to wrap our heads around just how complex this is. I mean, who exactly are we talking about when we say English language learners? Okay, this is what's so wild. The term ELL is this giant umbrella for a hugely diverse group of kids. I mean, just picture this. A teacher could have a student who was a doctor back in their home country, totally fluent and educated in their first language, sitting right next to a student whose education was completely disrupted by war, who maybe has never even held a pencil before. They're coming from totally different cultures, different family situations, and that right there is why a one-size-fits-all approach just doesn't work. It can't.
And that brings us to this light bulb moment from a teacher named Mrs. Shell. She figured out that the real roadblock for her students wasn't just learning the what, the math or the history. It was learning the language of school itself. Think about it. All that specific vocabulary, the way you structure a sentence to analyze something or hypothesize or explain, that's what we call academic language. And she realized she had to teach that step by step on purpose.
So, that's the challenge. But what's the goal? Well, the entire field has made this huge shift away from just memorizing grammar rules. Today, the big goal is something called communicative competence. And the philosophy behind that is something called communicative language teaching, or CLT for short. The whole idea is simple, but it's a game changer. You learn a language by actually using it for a real reason. The goal isn't to have perfect grammar, it's to be able to do stuff. Like, can you order food? Can you share your opinion? Can you understand directions? The interaction itself is how you learn, and it's the ultimate goal.
So how does this actually play out in a classroom? Well, it's pretty cool. Teachers now have two goals for every lesson. First, there's the content objective. That's the what. Like, today we're going to analyze the causes of the Civil War. But then, and this is key, there's the language objective. That's the how. How are students going to use language to prove they get it? In this case, it's write a paragraph justifying an argument. Suddenly, every single teacher, whether they teach science or history, is also a language teacher. It's brilliant.
Okay, so we've covered the theory. Now let's get practical. What's in the toolkit? What does this actually look like for a teacher on, a regular Tuesday morning? One of the absolute cornerstones is this motto called I do it, we do it. It's all about slowly handing over the reins. So first, the teacher does it. They show exactly how to do something, thinking out loud the whole time. Then we do it. The whole class tries it together with the teacher right there, guiding them and giving feedback. It's all about building that confidence and skill before a student is ever expected to fly solo. And great teaching means you're hitting all four language skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So for speaking, a teacher might give students a sentence starter, something like, I think the most important thing is, just to help them get their thoughts organized. Or for writing, they might use a graphic organizer, which is basically a visual map to help plan out an essay. It's all about providing that support.
And then there's the power of visuals. I mean, visuals are like a universal language, right? Think about it. A student might totally understand a complex idea like photosynthesis in their head, but they just don't have the English words for it yet. A simple diagram can instantly build that bridge. It makes these big, abstract ideas easy to grasp so the student can focus on connecting what they already know to the new language.
So all these awesome classroom strategies, they don't just happen in a bubble. It's time to zoom out a bit. They're all part of a much bigger blueprint, a system of professional standards that make sure every student gets a high-quality, consistent education. And that's where organizations like the Southern Association of Independent Schools, or SAIS, come into the picture. The best way to think about accreditation is like a seal of approval. When a school is accredited, it means they've been checked out against a really tough set of standards. It tells you that the whole school, from the top down, is set up and ready to support every single student.
And let's be clear, this is a highly professional field. It's not enough to just be a native English speaker. You've got these major organizations like TESOL, ELL, and WIDA that set the bar for excellence. They create the actual standards that define what a great teacher and a great program look like. They're the ones setting the benchmarks for everything, making sure students are getting the best education possible.
Now, for a lot of students, this whole journey leads up to a big moment, a high-stakes proficiency test. We're talking about tests like the IELTS, the TOEFL, or the Duolingo English test. Passing one of these can be the key that unlocks the door to a university or a career. So yeah, they're a huge deal. But what does it actually take to get a good score?
Let's make this real. A score of 7 on the IELTS is a pretty common requirement to get into a university. To get that score on the reading test, you have to answer at least 30 out of 40 questions correctly. And we're not talking about simple tests. This is dense, academic stuff from journals and books. To pull that off, that shows a seriously high level of English skill.
But you know, it's not all about tests and teaching strategies. There's this incredibly important human side to all of this. The best programs get that you're not just teaching a language, you're teaching a whole person. And that has to start with creating a welcoming, inclusive environment and advocating for every student.
And this is so important. Making sure English learners get to access the entire curriculum, not just a watered-down version, isn't just a nice thing to do. It's their legal right. So educators have this huge responsibility, both professionally and morally, to be advocates for their students, to fight to make sure they have everything they need to be a full part of the school.
Because at the end of the day, learning can't happen without safety. It's the absolute foundation. A student just can't learn if they feel scared or unwelcome or like they don't belong. That's why schools have these strict, zero-tolerance policies against things like bullying and discrimination. A safe, supportive environment isn't a bonus, it's a non-negotiable.
And all of this really changes what it means to be a teacher today. You're not just up there delivering information. You're what some people call a sociocultural mediator. That's a fancy way of saying you're building bridges between all the different cultures in your classroom. You're making sure everyone feels respected and that every student's background is treated like the asset that it is.
So when you put all of these pieces together, the teaching methods, the big systems, the advocacy, that crucial human element, it all boils down to one final really important question. What does true inclusion actually look like? And in the end, I think it comes down to this powerful quote from the U.S. Department of Education. The goal is to, quote, create safe, inclusive, supportive, and fair school climates. That's it. That is the real measure of success. It's about building a place where every single student, no matter what language they bring with them, gets a real chance to thrive.
For free ESL practice test, you can either click the link in the description or simply scan the QR code on the screen.